father of Hollywood.com, along with Truthwins.com, presents Dreamland New Beginnings, written by Dr. Galen Whitley Keith, narrated by Keith Whitley. Chapter 5. Night had settled softly over the Whitley home, the grand Queen Anne silhouette rising in quiet pride beneath a pale moon. In the dining room window, the faint glow of a candelabra burned bravely against the dark, throwing its flickering light across etched glass panes. Inside, the table was set for two. H.J.'s chair stood empty, his dinner plate cooled and untouched. Across from him sat Fanny, her dark hair swept neatly, and her gown selected with care, as though this evening, above others, she had hoped to rekindle closeness with her husband. The candlesticks gleamed beside her wine glass, which she brought to her lips and drained in one final sip. The glass tipped in her unsteady hand and toppled against the table, splitting into pieces across the linen. The sound brought her suddenly into herself, and she pressed her palms over her face. Wine-warm tears spilled quickly down her cheeks. "H.J., where are you?" she murmured, voice trembling. "You promised you would be home more. Not married to the rails, but home." Her bitterness broke into a laugh choked with tears. "You are such a fop-doodle. My fop-doodle." Her eyes shifted, softening as they fell upon Sarah. The little one sat upright in her high chair, curls wild, a smear of crumbs upon her cheeks, clutching tightly to her crumbling biscuit as if it were treasure. The sight melted her mother's anguish into tenderness. "Sarah," Fanny whispered gently, leaning close, "are you done?" She brushed crumbs from the tray, feeding them one by one to Lucky, who hovered at her skirts with patient devotion. Sarah, giggling, flung the last piece herself, and the dog snapped it in midair. Fanny laughed with her daughter, the sound soft and fleeting, like a bell far off in the dark. In the city, the gaslight pooled across ledgers and maps spread wide across H.J. Whitley's desk. He leaned forward, sleeves rolled back, face intent. Across from him, two executives spoke in restless tones, while his secretary scrawled sharp notes with black ink. "The costs, Whitley, they are too high," one of the men grumbled. "We'll have to cut corners or abandon the route altogether." H.J. tapped a finger along the map. Calm, but firm. "Perhaps we can renegotiate with Parker. The man postures, but I believe him still reasonable." The second executive laughed harshly. "Reasonable? That miser reuses his coffee grounds for a second pot in the morning." The room swelled with chuckling. H.J. permitted himself the faintest smile, then shook his head. "Leave him to me. At our next meeting, the matter will be settled, and we'll review the final terms. Gentlemen, the future won't wait for delays." The clock on the doorframe struck 8. Weariness crept into his expression. "It grows late, and I must return home." They stood together, shook hands. Always the train of ambition pulled at him, but always some deeper pull beneath it called toward hearth and family. Tonight, perhaps, he would listen. In the Whitley home, Fanny wiped at her cheeks, gathering herself as Sarah yawned broadly and rubbed her tiny fists across her eyes. "Bedtime now, sweetheart." She lifted her bundle into her arms, kissed her soft curls, and pressed her cheek against the child's warm head. She bent to gather a smaller candle, lifting it to light the way up the grand staircase. Lucky trotted at her heels, nails clicking faint across the hardwood. At the front door, she opened it briefly, letting him into the night air to wait, and forgot, in her frazzled state, to snuff the candelabra glowing still upon the dining table. Softly, she hummed a lullaby as she ascended, her voice rising faintly against the hush of the spacious house. In Sarah's room, she dressed her in a nightgown, settled her into the cradle, and rocked her gently until the little one rolled over, eyes sliding closed with contentment. Fanny lingered, hand hovering in tender paws above the cradle, reluctant to let go of the stillness. At last she left with measured silence, walking down the dim corridor. A floorboard creaked faintly below. Her heart surged. She bent quickly over the banister rail, praying it was H.J. returned to her. The hallway below lay empty. Disappointed, she turned toward her own chamber. Downstairs, the unattended candelabra wavered. One candle, melting low, bent in its socket and toppled. Wax splattered as the flame touched linen. The tablecloth smoldered, then caught. Fanny had scarcely laid her head upon the pillow when Lucky's bark startled her, at first distant, then frantic. She opened her eyes to smoke thick against the air. Rushing into the corridor, she saw Flame reaching, hungry, up the stairwell, her breath caught in terror. Dear God! She bolted to Sarah's room, lifted her from the cradle even as the smoke thickened, and cradled her tightly to her chest. The babe, startled, began to cry, her wails sharp against the roar. Fanny rushed toward the stairs, already engulfed. Fire licked furiously at the banister, the heat scorching her face, driving her back. Heart pounding, she spun toward her own chamber flames, closing the door before she reached it. She turned again, but every passage was aflame. The ceiling above crackled and thundered as if the whole house leaned down to bury her. Terrified, she clutched Sarah to her breast, shielding her with trembling arms. The look on her face was pure horror, yet also a mother's unflinching love. Out upon the moonlit road, H.J. pressed his horse to a gallop. A red glow spread on the horizon, not the promise of sunrise, but the curse of flame. His stomach sank as the thought thundered, my house, my family. Spurring faster, he rounded the last bend and saw it, the Whitley home. Its proud towers now shrouded in fire, windows vomiting flame, timbers collapsing in sparks. From the porch, Lucky barked a warning that broke with panic. H.J.'s heart nearly split. He threw himself from his horse, racing to the doorstep. The fire blasted backward at him, forcing him to stagger. He cried out for Fanny, for Sarah, but the roaring flame drowned him. He ran to the side windows, each one ablaze with inferno. Then he reached Sarah's window, and there, oh God, there they stood. Fanny, hair wild, face contorted in terror, holding their child tightly in her arms. He waved frantically, screamed for her, "Jump, Fanny, jump, I will catch you!" But she stood frozen, paralyzed by smoke and fire, her figure framed an instant longer, then swallowed whole as the roof sagged and the front of the house collapsed inward. The crack of falling beams echoed like gunfire. The building shuddered, timbers collapsing in sparks. H.J.'s scream tore through the night but reached nothing. He staggered, fell to his knees in the dirt, eyes brimming with tears. Lucky rushed to his side, pawing at his arm with pitiful whines, but H.J.'s gaze remained fixed on the crumbling home once filled with laughter. Sobs broke from his chest. He pressed his face into his hands, groaning aloud. "Why? God, why?" Each breath shook with anguish. The flames' roar mocked him, the heavens deaf above. At last, face streaked with ash and tears, he forced himself to rise. He placed his hat back upon his head as if to shield himself from the world's cruelty, his jaws locked in torment and fury. Turning to his horse, he rubbed his hand against Lucky's head. The dog whined, pressing mournfully against him. He mounted slowly, his movements mechanical, hollow. The home burned behind him, collapsing steadily into embers. Fanny's laughter, Sarah's giggles, all gone within its ruin. His heart, too, smoldered into ash. "Come on, Lucky," he whispered hoarsely, steadying the reins. With a nudge, the stallion set off into the dark, carrying a broken man away from the ruins of all he loved, into a night with no stars. And behind them, the flames still roared, marking the end of one life and the beginning of a harder, lonelier one. Come back next Wednesday to hear the next chapter of Dreamland New Beginnings, written by Dr. Galen Whitley Keith, narrated by Keith Whitley.